The views and opinions on Where Did the Road Go belong to those making them. Do not mistake allowing freedom of speech for agreement. This month's Where Did the Road Go is sponsored by the following amazing individuals: Greg Ross, Bill Illuminati, Allison Cook, No One, Yvonne Williams, Super Inframan, 36 Dingo, and Michael Frisky. Thank you all for helping to make this show possible. And if you'd like to help out, become a patron at wheredidtheroadgo.com. It's only $3 a month for lots of extra content.
Transmission start. Welcome to Where Did the Road Go? Join us as we wander off the path and explore lost history, consciousness, the paranormal, unexplained mysteries, alternative thought, and much more. We are present on the web at wheredidtheroadgo.com. Now here is your host, Seriah.
Welcome to this edition of Where Did the Road Go? And tonight I have with me Mr. Red Pill Junkie.
Sorry, I can't talk about that.
Oh, okay. And Mr. Charles Lear.
Hello, Seriah.
I've never had you two on together. So it's a first. Yeah, that's
First
all.
of many.
So, Charles, you had actually written me and said you specifically wanted to come on with Miguel because Miguel's so awesome. And also he had written an article on the Daily Show appearance of Luis Elizondo. Now, Red Pill, you've also listened to the Joe Rogan interview, and Charles, you've read the book. I've read Red Pill's article and then watched the Daily Show, and that was it. So you guys know much more than me.
Right on.
So
yeah, actually, what I was impressed about with Miguel's article is mainly him saying that the UFO community is basically a microcosm, and whereas we all think him releasing Immanent and doing his book tour, and the fact that it's a New York Times bestseller is a huge earth-shattering deal, and it really isn't. Do you agree with that, Miguel?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I don't know. I don't even remember what I wrote. Obviously, like many people interested in UFOs, I've been trying to follow the story of Luis Elizondo ever since he came out of the woodwork in 2017. First in that, I don't know if you guys even saw that live presentation.
Oh yeah. It wasn't even live. There was nobody there. It was an empty. An empty audit. It was staged. So
that's right. That's one of the many misperception strategies they engaged in during their short tenure in the To the Stars Academy of Sciences, and I don't know what else was TTSA, Sciences and
To the Stars Academy.
Yeah. So trying to figure out Elizondo is really like trying to hold sand in your hands.
Well, I've got a take on him I think you guys might be interested in.
Yes.
I believe he's in earnest, and I believe he's a UFO guy like we are, a UFO nerd. He seems genuinely into this, and it seems to me if somebody like me actually had that kind of influence and those kinds of connections, I certainly would take advantage of them as well. The difference between Lou Elizondo and myself, though, is I'm not a zealot, and I really, I look at this as from a point of view of a historian and write about it with as much journalistic integrity as I can muster, and I'm really just covering historical cases for the most part, whereas he's trying to convince people at large that this is a real phenomenon. He's also convinced that the government is hiding alien bodies and crashed saucers. And in the book, he makes reference to what he calls the legacy group. Right. And which is, if you just replace legacy group with MJ12, it's the same thing. Mm-hmm. And he refers to that throughout. The closest thing he really gets to saying he's handled any kind of alien technology is saying he's handled an implant. And he's ascribed that he says was taken out by, I think, a doctor at the VA hospital from a serviceman who had a close encounter.
Okay.
So that's as close to him. And he also mentions this piece of metal alloy with, I think it was aluminum with bismuth sandwiched in between it. That has actually recently been tested, and it came out nothing alien about that.
Right.
This is the famous Art's parts, right?
I don't know if that was Art's parts.
I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, what I remember is that back when To the Stars was still trying to maintain a facade of being a true organization devoted to scientifically study these things, they got a hold of this piece that was originally obtained by, or received, I should say, by Art Bell, who was sent by one of his listeners, who told him that it was a true wreckage piece from the original Roswell crash in 1947. And then, as things will have it, that piece ended up in the hands of Linda Moulton Howe, who, for people who have been following the UFO, let's say, mythology in the last 30 years, they know that Linda Moulton Howe became kind of like a central figure, especially with regards to the whole thing of the Bennewitz affair and all those shenanigans that were happening with him and Richard Doty. Obviously, this is the moment when I need to plug Adam Gorightly's most excellent book, Saucers, Kooks, Spooks and Kooks.
Oh, definitely.
Which is a really good, expose, at least a very good summary of these connections, which I think also have branches that, well, like I'm saying right now, these branches go beyond the 1990s and the early 2000s and reach to the stars when Linda Moulton Howe, for some reason, decided to lend or bequeath this alleged wreckage from Roswell, which, by the way, was just I don't know the exact size of this metal piece. I assume it is tiny. I don't know, maybe just 1 inch or even less in length. And Tom DeLonge and the TTSA guys, they somehow made an arrangement with the military branch of the United States, in order to analyze this piece using their facilities, their lab facilities. This was called the Adam Project by these guys. And I think that happened, I want to say 2019. I could probably look it up on the Daily Grail. And then one of the arrangements that TTSA did with the military, by the way, with the Army, is that they didn't have to disclose anything, to the public about whatever they managed to uncover about this piece, whether it had some kind of anti-gravity properties or maybe anti-stealth properties, whatever. The Army had the rights not to disclose this, and it's weird what TTSA got from this deal. It seemed pretty unilateral. Only they managed to have these scientists to take a serious look to the piece, and then like Charles is saying, Arrow, the government funded program, Pentagon program to study UFOs that resulted out of all these leaks out of OSAP and AATIP and the UAP task force. They found out through the Army that the Army didn't get any significant results about this piece, that it was just an unusual piece. I think that the only thing is that they have very unusual levels of, like you say, bismuth, and probably, maybe manganese?
Well, the article just came out I just looked it up. It's in IFL Science. It says a strange metal shard probably isn't evidence of alien technology, a U.S. national laboratory concludes. So that just came out, I think this week. And yeah, it is it does mention the To the Stars Academy and Arrow. It says the Oak Ridge National Laboratory analyzed a sample in 2022, and the results have recently been published. And it says the material is a magnesium alloy, magnesium, zinc, and bismuth. And so, yeah, there is this whole thing about it possibly being a waveguide. And they said the physical properties are consistent with material of terrestrial origin. And I think the idea is that it wouldn't work as a waveguide. So that's what just came out.
Yeah, I remember the time that Tom DeLonge got interviewed by Joe Rogan. Like, he kept saying these incoherent things about these metamaterials. Back when metamaterial became like the catchphrase in ufology, right?
Yeah.
I guess now his legacy program is the new catchphrase.
Yeah.
But back then he was saying that these metamaterials, if you applied terahertz high levels of energy to it, which a scientist know that this is kind of like nonsense talk. Like energy doesn't work that way. There is terahertz is not like a measurement of energy levels. It's a measurement
of frequency.
Exactly, a frequency unit. Yeah. But he was saying that if you apply that, you will have, like you say, like a wavelength properties or anti-gravity properties or God knows what else. And I don't know if you read, but if maybe we could jump to the book, Charles, and all the theories that Elizondo proposes about how UFOs operate, which are basically the theories that Hal Puthoff trying to concoct ever since, I don't know, the late 70s.
Yeah. Well, let me say one thing about the book that really struck me is that it reads like if you take out Elizondo's personal life stories, it really reads like an old-timey UFO book. I was really struck by the similarities between Elizondo and Donald Keyhoe.
Interesting. Interesting.
And Keyhoe had all these intelligence community connections as well. Hillenkoetter, first director of the CIA, was on his board of directors at NICAP.
Right.
And it's just, Elizondo's, I think Elizondo is much better on camera and has a much better personality. He doesn't have that angry elf thing going that Keyhoe had. But yeah, it really reads like an old-timey UFO book. And it's, and also the other thing that's interesting is Keyhoe is responsible for hearing, and NICAP and Keyhoe are responsible for hearings in Congress on the UFO subject, just as Elizondo is. So I find that really interesting.
Well, Keyhoe was an Army colonel, was it? I don't know. He was Marines. I don't know.
Yeah, he was a Marine. He actually was a pilot for the Marines back in the day. And what's really interesting about Keyhoe is he was, I think he was Lindbergh's press secretary, agent for a while. Right. And he actually traveled with Lindbergh, and he wrote a whole book about Lindbergh.
One will imagine, I mean, it's a nice what-if experiment. What would have happened if Lindbergh had become president? If his child hadn't been killed. But getting back to Elizondo, I mean, obviously he has more charisma than Keyhoe because, for starters, he's a former counterintelligence agent. So he's it's something that I'm always trying to detect in his interviews, how he's always trying to manipulate the people he's talking to by way of being in their good graces and trying to be nice to them and like, for example, he always said, whenever someone asks him something, he always says, "Oh, I'm so glad you asked me that." Oh, that is such a great question. Like, those kind of things. And he's also very self-deprecating. I kept seeing how with Joe, he kept mentioning how, like, he's not, how ugly he is physically. He basically said that, and how he's such a, when Joe joked with him and said, "Oh, I need to get you drunk, so to see if you spill the beans." Yeah. He was saying, "Oh, I'm such a lightweight." No. Like,
I actually liked his haircut on the Daily Show. But you should listen to him on Martin's show. That was really interesting. Martin Willis is the guy I write for over at Podcast UFO. I do a regular blog for him. But there was an awesome moment. What's funny with Martin is that he gets, the first time he went to interview Elizondo was way back when. I think it was to the Stars Academy days. And he said he checked out his whole studio, and then when he went to do the interview, everything went haywire. And it got to the point, it was a disaster, and he couldn't hear Elizondo. Elizondo couldn't hear him. I think they were texting back and forth or typing in questions back and forth. And Martin had, Elizondo talked, and Martin had to dub his voice in recordings afterwards. So this latest one, it just came out, I think, a couple weeks ago, might have been a couple of weeks ago. But anyway, he tested everything, and then things went nuts on Elizondo's end. His computer programs, he ended up having to do the interview over the phone. Interview's going pretty well. But then Elizondo's phone starts whacking out. And then it's, they're still managing to get through. But Martin says, let's get to some listener questions. Well, here's one comment. James Likowski says, it's not possible to study or understand the bulk UFO phenomenon without simultaneously viewing the phenomenon with a nuts and bolts and a psychic perspective. So what's really funny about that is Martin had no idea it was the James Likowski. I actually asked him that, and he texted me back, "No," with an exclamation point. So he very innocently passed that along to Lou, to Mr. Elizondo. And Elizondo actually, he said, he says a human body is more than just a body. It's a spiritual, etc., being. So you can't look at it just as a body. So he's saying that Likowski is saying you need to look at the phenomenon holistically. Yeah. And he says AATIP was more nuts and bolts military encounter based. But he said he agreed with Likowski. And at that point, the audio cleared up. So, whatever that means. That's interesting. But it's also really interesting. Martin got into the green orbs with him. And he talked freely about that.
Before we go to the green orbs, I wanted just to point out that, this thing of Elizondo mentioning how he's very much in sync with the psychic aspect of UFOs, you read in his book, and this is something that I already know, that he even was trained in remote viewing.
Yeah, well, it's like the last of the first Earth Battalion.
Yeah, this is so insane.
But he doesn't
he even tried to do that. He remote view was one of the people they got detained in Guantanamo.
He makes some pretty bold claims. But
so was this all before he got involved with OSAP AATIP?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. This was back when he was. He talks about being in Afghanistan
which is funny because if you listen to many of his interviews, including the Joe Rogan interview, he's always trying to present himself as a very science-oriented, no-nonsense guy, who was like just the facts, like not going beyond the established paradigm, if you will. Like he keeps repeating how he studied microbiology, and I don't understand how a microbiologist ends up being a torturer well, maybe I can. Someone who does torture in Guantanamo, but then he keeps saying that, and he saying how then that was the approach, almost like a very materialistic approach to UFOs, and then he reluctantly, according to these interviews, that's the way that he shows himself, or he presents himself, that he reluctantly understood that UFOs are real. But if in the book, as you're explaining, he already had like a foot in the, let's say, the woo-woo camp.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it's like I say, I look at him as somebody who's in earnest and really believes in this stuff, and I think he's under the sway of Hal Puthoff. I kind of look at it like Hal Puthoff was an ex-Scientologist. He left Scientology. It seems that Puthoff is forming his own church. So, it seems that Puthoff has been just an absolutely huge influence on Elizondo, and the way Elizondo thinks. I mean, he basically says Roswell is real because Puthoff told him Roswell was real in the book.
Interesting.
And it's the way they're working Congress right now. It seems that Elizondo, he's actually referred to everybody doing their job. He says a hammer does a job of a hammer, and a screwdriver does the job of a screwdriver. So we all have our individual jobs. So, Elizondo is the face of this, and he's the guy that the press talks to, and it's like I can't believe his name. It's who's the Mellon? Yes, Chris Mellon is seems to be the muscle, and Puthoff is the scientist, almost spiritual advisor,
the puppet master. So what you seem to be suggesting, Charles, is that Elizondo is a true believer, and he is operating from that perspective, that of being a true believer, like being really believing the things he says, and really being 100% honest with his claims.
Yeah, and I think, well, I mean, I wouldn't say 100% honest. I think there's a touch of one thing I perceive going on is it's kind of like if there's a miracle and somebody in an established church, let's say the Vatican, okay? So imagine this scenario. There's a miracle, and the Vatican wants to promote it to, that's probably a really bad example. Okay, let's just, imaginary church wants to promote a belief, and somebody comes up with a miracle, like seeing one of their saints burned into a piece of toast. And in order to promote the faith, even though they know this is maybe a little dicey, and there's no definite proof that this is truly a miracle, they promote the miracle to promote the faith. So I think there's a touch of that going on, where they're, kind of stretching truths and, letting things go a little bit just because, they want to keep moving the needle forward. That's another phrase that keeps coming up in this whole conversation.
Right.
And they certainly have. But
I mean, because my opinion is, I mean, you seem to equate Elizondo more to a figure, using historical comparisons. You seem to compare him more to someone like Donald Keyhoe, trying to get congressional hearings and trying to force the hand of the government towards more transparency and all that. Whereas I, on the other hand, I'm not shy to claim that I see Elizondo probably more like a Rick Doty person, more like someone with a hidden agenda, someone who is using the UFO card maybe for other purposes that have absolutely nothing to do with UFOs. And I don't know, maybe the reason is because, well, I mean, his background, he's like we're saying, where he's a counterintelligence agent, he's a spook, so that brings in the red flags. Also, like, he makes all these mistakes that seem almost deliberate.
Yes.
In his presentations, like he keeps saying that when he entered the UFO, when he took the UFO desk, as it were, like he didn't want to know anything about UFO lore. He wanted to be like totally, uncontaminated by the UFO literature. But nowadays, obviously, like you're saying, he keeps talking about Roswell, and he keeps showing Joe Rogan all these documents that have been public knowledge in the UFO field for years and years, like the Lincoln La Paz memo mentioning the sightings of UFOs, lights, green fireballs at the Los Alamos test range and all that. But, for example, I think that when he went to Italy, and by the way, in the book, for some reason he bragged about being known as the torture czar in the international community, and that he bragged about having an international warrant for his arrest if he ever traveled to Europe. But then he went, when he was working with To the Stars, and they were producing this TV show Unidentified. They traveled to Italy, and they had a meeting with. They said that in the show they said that they had a meeting with a government agency, an Italian government agency, but in reality it was just a bunch of UFO aficionados, some who might have had connections with the government, and then I remember he showed a photograph, an image, let's say, of the famous 1952 UFO wave over Washington, D.C., which was a big deal. It prompted a press conference by the Air Force, which was the biggest press conference since the end of World War II, in which the Air Force said, well, these were just thermal inversions, and they were just things that were making the radar.
Yeah, this is all 1952, and what's funny is Project Blue Book got the news secondhand from newspapers. Nobody bothered to contact them when this was all going on. But anyway, what I wanted to say is that she showed an image saying this is a photograph of the object that were flying over Washington, D.C., and everybody who has a modicum of knowledge about the UFO field knows that image is not a real photograph. It's a reconstruction that was made to show how the object might have looked like, or even some people have said that it's that there actually were temperature inversions, and it's a reflection of street lamps below, and you can kind of line it. You can line it up with the street lamps below. Yeah, that's UFOs over the Capitol. And
then he excused himself, said, "Well, I had jet lag. I couldn't find a decent Cuban coffee in Italy." It's like, get the hell out of here. Haven't you heard of a thing called espresso?
when you get back to the To the Stars Academy press conference, quote unquote, you can't forget Chris Mellon standing in front of a photograph of a Mylar balloon talking about the bizarre physics these objects.
That's right.
Yeah.
So these guys definitely could use some be better informed. And I'd also as Congress is looking into it. Well, nobody's talking about Tim Burchett and Jaime Maussan. You know about that, right?
Yeah. Also, when he mentions to Joe Rogan that he's never met Bob Lazar,
He doesn't mention Bob Lazar in the book either. I find it really intriguing that Bob Lazar is not mentioned when he thanks Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp
Yeah, exactly.
There's no mention made of Bob Lazar. There's no mention made of MJ-12. So I found that intriguing. Also, there's no mention of Jim Channon and the 1st Earth Battalion, which is, he's the guy responsible for the whole idea of super soldiers and helping to promote the whole remote viewing thing.
I suppose there is a mention of Bob Bigelow.
I don't recall that, actually.
No, really?
I'll look that up real quick.
Because here there's this thing about
oh yeah, he definitely Bigelow's all over the place.
Elizondo mentioned Bigelow just once during the Joe Rogan interview, and how he's being instrumental in this recent interest in UFOs. He even said that Bigelow was a true patriot because he has been paying out of his own pocket UFO study. He didn't mention needs. But obviously, this is what he's talking about. Obviously, he didn't mention how Bigelow economically supported both the Bob DeSantis presidential campaign and also right now the Trump presidential campaign. Anyway,
but you mentioned what agenda do you think Elizondo would have other than truly being an advocate for disclosure?
I mean, what is disclosure? What is the purpose of disclosure? Right now, I feel that disclosure what has brought to us in the last 6 years is more mentions of UFOs in mainstream media and more interest of UFOs among people in the U.S. Congress, and as a result of that, changes in legislation that will bring about allocation of public monies to certain programs.
But he's retired. He's
retired, but he's still a consultant.
According to him, he was living in an during the TTSA debacle. He was living in an RV on somebody else's property for a bit.
Oh, boo-hoo. Well, but he's nonetheless, he's a member, or he's an associate of several private endeavors, companies that are trying to make money out of this recent UFO interest. Mm-hmm. Not to mention how he is obviously entering into the lecture circuit, right? Like the last thing I read is he's going to have some a presentation, because it's not a conference, because he's the only presenter, I think in Chicago, I don't remember, and he was offering a special dinner with him, at a price of $250 per plate, just to have the privilege of sitting with him, just to tell you in your face that he cannot tell you certain things.
Okay. Well, how about this as an agenda? Hal Puthoff, okay?
Yeah.
My take on Hal Puthoff is that after he lost that sweet Project Stargate deal, the paycheck he got from the government to study the paranormal, I think he's been chasing after that ever since.
Right.
And it seems to be within his grasp right now.
Right. The Hal Puthoff and his friends, Eric Davis.
So that's looking for a pay. So that, in my mind, the agenda is looking for a paycheck to study the paranormal.
That's true.
Which makes them, paranormal enthusiasts.
Exactly. After going with Bob Bigelow, Hal Puthoff also knocked on the door of this guy, Joe Firmich, who was for a while considered something of a computer whiz kid from Utah. And Joe Firmich's story is really interesting because he claimed to have had a close encounter experience that, if you read it, it's basically like a modernized version of the Joseph Smith origin story of Mormonism.
Really?
You know, he basically had a night visitation of this tall entity, human-looking, white-clad, basically an angel, right? Like the angel Moroni that visited Joseph Smith. And according to the story, I remember reading this a long time ago in a Spanish magazine of all things. The entity, alien, angel, whatever, he was kind of annoyed, and he communicated to Firmage, like asking him, "Why have you like called me or summoned me?" And Firmage, instead of being terrorized or instead of being, totally amazed by this experience, he readily answered and says, "Because I want to go into space." And the entity told him, "What makes you think that you are worthy to go into space?" And Firmage was a young kid at this time. He was just in his 20s. He said to the entity, "Because I'm willing to give my life for it." And I think, according to the story, at that time, there was some kind of like glowing orb that came out of this being that landed inside of Joe Firmage. And, kind of almost like a true bona fide mystical experience. And then when Firmage was, like I said, still living with his parents, he confessed this experience to his father. His father told him that he had had something similar happen to him. Anyway, Joe Firmage made a lot of money for a while with his computer company, and then he wanted to use that money in order to not only study UFOs, but also to replicate what he considers to be the anti-gravity technology that made UFOs perform the things that people have reported for decades. The anti-gravity, the floating, the instant changes, acceleration, and like Charles is saying, Hal Puthoff was involved with this guy, and he used millions from him in order to try to build this anti-gravity device.
Brandon Fugel, the Skinwalker Ranch owner.
Brandon Fugel
went through the same thing.
Yeah, he was a partner with Joe Firmage, and he, after a while, he actually confessed that that this story, because he wanted to keep his association with Firmage kind of like not confidential, but not being that well like so public, because Joe Firmage, if you follow his story, he's now having a lot of problems. Obviously all his companies went bankrupt. He's like some people in the UFO field. He's been involved in frauds and swindling operations. I think the last time he got in trouble with the law, he was trying to scam old ladies out of their money, which reminds me of those stories of the guy who wanted to sell old ladies mining.
Yeah, right. What that Reinhardt was it?
Reinhardt, exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
So. Well, Chris Elizondo claims Chris Mellon had a personal UFO experience. He says that he rarely talks about, but he says that's Chris Mellon's motivation for his enthusiasm on the subject. I'm just throwing that out. But one thing I wanted to mention is you in your article you talk about if disclosure doesn't come with this next hearing, that people are just going to start turning their backs on this whole thing. But nobody's talking about the fact that Tim Burchett told Jamie Masson just recently that he is going to get resources to analyze the mummies that Masson is toting as being alien bodies. Yeah. And this is Tim Burchett in Congress, who was at the, you can read him speaking at the Grush hearings in the transcripts. So this is, a member of Congress. What I'm getting to is like these guys haven't been down this road like a lot of us, UFO nerds.
I mean, what this tells me is not that the UFO stories are getting better and more believable. What this tells me is that the level of critical thinking among people in Congress and among politicians is getting lower and lower.
And not to mention the press. Yeah, I mean, all that is like really, really concerning. Like, what concerns me is that the whole AATIP versus OSAP thing. One thing I can really fault Elizondo is that he's dancing around the whole head of the DOD's UAP investigation program. AATIP. Okay, so AATIP was totally unfunded. Likowski said straight out in Skinwalker at the Pentagon that AATIP was just a nickname.
Yeah.
And Elizondo in the book describes it as being unfunded, and it goes into the drama of them trying to get funding for it. He also, in the interview with on the Daily Show, doesn't say he's the head of it.
Exactly. I was going to try to say that because at the beginning of his, becoming a public figure, he was showing himself, and also Leslie Kean and Ralph Blumenthal portrayed him as being the head of the government UFO program.
Right, and they do it again. You just say that was just the latest New York Times review of his book. They state it again. Okay, so this is the New York Times that never retracted the first inaccuracy, as now they put up Blumenthal and Keane again, saying the same thing. But even on the Daily Show, I don't actually, I had it written down somewhere. I can't find it right now, but he did say that he was just one. It says one of its senior members is what he called himself.
Yeah, and I think that lately he began to talk how he was enrolled by Likowski, right?
Yeah.
And as a chief of security, right?
Yes. And Likowski barely mentions him in the book. He talks about him in Skinwalker at the Pentagon. Likowski basically, I think he talks about him about being the counterintelligence guy, and mentions him at a dinner party, telling his war story that he tells in the book.
Party. Yeah.
Of having an inkling that something was wrong, which he attributes to his remote viewing in a certain area that his troops were about to go into, and he said, "I'm not taking you guys in," and somebody else went in, and they all died because of an IED.
That dinner party, that's something that really interests me. And there's a guy I follow on Substack, Tanner F. Boyle. He has a Substack called Getting Spooked, in which he has written several lengthy pieces about Christopher Bledsoe and his involvement with people in the intelligence community, including Luis Elizondo and Chris Mellon. And one of the things he mentions is a dinner party that they had that was more than a dinner party. This was, as I know it, maybe I'm mistaken, but the way that I understand this is that it was some kind of like a private conference that was paid by a very wealthy anonymous individual, and several prominent people in the field were invited to this event. One of them was Stan Friedman. And in the Joe Rogan interview, Elizondo mentioned that Bob Bigelow was behind this dinner. I'm not sure if this is a different dinner or this
is this the one where they met Uchoa?
Apparently, this is the one where they met
Bigelow, Hal Puthoff,
and according according to Tanner F. Boyle, this is also where the famous Tyler Jordan, the famous Tyler from the book American Cosmic, was also in this dinner.
Oh wow!
So there's a lot of things that happen in that dinner. That all these that happened, I think it was 2013, 2014. I think it was 2013. Well, all these pieces became started to get connected. And also how Diana Pasulka got involved with Christopher Bledsoe and got involved with Tyler. because I don't know, let me ask you this. I wanted to ask you two things. One is, what is your opinion about the relationship between James Likowski, Jay Stratton, and Luis Elizondo? Because it seems to me like we're supposed to have been former colleagues, but now it seems to me like they are, I don't want to say enemies, but they seem to be like not in the same page.
Well, I mean, in Martin's interview right there, Likowski just went right at him. Right. Saying, you're too nuts and bolts. And he mentions Elizondo mentions in his book, he doesn't diss Likowski at all in the book. He praises him. But he's basically talking about Likowski getting too close to talking about angels and demons for comfort. And them kind of, advising him to back off. I believe that's what he said. But so there's definitely distance between them, and the fact that Likowski barely mentions him in Skinwalker at the Pentagon. Okay. I think might be some jealousy with Likowski that, Elizondo's the guy who got all the press because he came out with the book Skinwalker at the Pentagon, around this.
Jay Stratton.
Jay Stratton's about to come out with a book. Yeah,
exactly. He's getting a book deal, and also Dave Grosh is getting a book deal.
And he plays in the band with Travis Taylor. Is that his name? The guy from the Skinwalker Ranch television show. Yeah. So he actually plays in a band with Travis Taylor on a reality television show about Skinwalker Ranch, and he calls the band Hitchhiker.
But the second question that I wanted to make right now is I wanted to ask if Christopher Bledsoe is mentioned in Elizondo's book.
I don't recall that at all. But I can look it up right now.
Because Christopher Bledsoe is an individual who loves to mention his connections to all these intelligence people. I mean, my opinion of Bledsoe is that I'm not necessarily putting into question his UFO claims. I'm not saying that.
Yeah, I've got 0 matches, and I typed in Bledsoe.
That's interesting because Bledsoe, as mentioned many times, I think he even showed photographs of him and Elizondo when Elizondo visited him in Florida. So I don't understand why Elizondo will go to a place to visit a UFO contactee, because there's no other way to describe Christopher Bledsoe, aside from calling him a religious mystic, because his tales about UFO contacts have more to do with things like Fatima than things like, I don't know, the Fire in the Sky story, right?
Yeah, his book was quite a good seller as well, as I
UFO
understand.
of God, right?
Yeah, right.
I mean, to me, my opinion of Christopher Bledsoe, it's not the first time that I've said it, is that he is like an example of someone who has been gaslit by the intelligence community, that maybe for the purposes of trying to see if they can conceive a new UFO religion in the United States.
That's quite interesting. We need a new opiate for the masses.
Right. I mean, you see, like I said, I don't have much of an opinion about Bledsoe's initial claims, but now you see the videos that he shares online, he and his son, and they're totally underwhelming. Like any light on his backyard is a UFO. It's like reminds me of Betty Hill back when she was already an old widow. And
I just wrote a couple of pieces about Betty Hill.
Every light in the sky to Betty was a UFO that was coming to visit her.
Yeah. Her all of her UFO friends, community friends, were saying, Betty, you should really back off. Your credibility is going down the toilet. But she stuck with it.
Yeah, I mean, bless her heart, and also bless Chris Bledsoe, his stories about the lady that sometimes he paints her as like the Virgin Mary, more of a American white version of the Virgin Mary, and in other times almost paints her as some kind of like a pagan deity, like the goddess Hecate. or something like that.
Oh.
Interesting.
Well, what about the whole trickster aspect of, going back to George Hansen, Trickster and the Paranormal? And how do you see this playing in this whole scenario?
What do you think, Seriah? You haven't talked much in this.
I mean, it's part and parcel of it. I mean, because I'm sure some of what we're getting is real, but a lot of it's probably nonsense and disinfo. So, I mean, yeah, the trickster aspect is definitely there. It's just not necessarily coming from the UFOs. It's coming from the officials who are, I think, that this is a ploy for money. As you said, I agree with you, Red Pill, that these people are basically trying to find ways to get money from the government. And
the ufologists or people in the government trying to get money from the government?
And guys like Luis Elizondo, I think, definitely are looking for that money for the stuff they're doing. But I think some of the people in the government are looking for more defense money. And this gives them an excuse to kind of throw that out there and be like, hey, what if this is real and there's aliens coming? We got to be prepared for that. Give us some money we don't have to report back to you with. I
can see that as a negative result of the efforts of Puthoff, Mellon, and Elizondo.
Yeah. So I think in the end, it generally comes down to money, like a lot of things do. I don't know if Elizondo's earnest or not, because like a lot of the stuff Red Pill pointed out, I mean, he's not consistent in the stuff he's talking about. He's not quite at the level of Tom there when he was on Rogan saying that every UFO video on YouTube was real.
Jesus Christ, yeah.
But he's not that far off either, because he's used known fakes as, proof, which means, does he really care that much?
He slowly but surely is going into that direction, isn't he? Like at the beginning, he was very careful with trying to express his opinions, like almost like saying, well, we don't know if these objects are Russian or Chinese or from some other nation, but we need to like that was the thing that they used, like the wedge they used in order to get into the public discussion, saying, well, there are things out there that are invading our airspace, and they could be a threat because they could be, adversarial advanced drones. And people say, well, drones, of course, we need to look into that. And then obviously then the Chinese spy balloons that the United States took down last year.
Right.
You're right. And people say, well, you see, there are things there in the sky that we need to be vigilant about. But then, like, obviously people get tired of that and say, stop talking about, Chinese drones. We want to talk about aliens. And he started to mention, like, well, maybe we're sharing the planet with another intelligence. And now he's really going and talking about aliens. He's not still going into the alien abduction camp, although Charles is mentioning that he saying about an implant,
right,
taken from a VA. So I'm sure that 5 years from now he's probably going to start talking about blue avians.
Well, he in the book he mentions the Nordics and the Greys.
Oh my God!
So,
well, I mean, that's a pretty common trope anyway.
Sure, the human looking and the more humanoid looking entities.
Yeah, he's really pretty much taking it straight from the established 1980s mythos.
Mm-hmm. I mean, mark my words, someday he's going to talk about the Dulce base.
Oh, probably.
He's going to go there.
I mean, they already brought Lazar back, so I mean, it's only a matter of time.
Exactly, and it's interesting how he's never like pissed in Lazar's turf. Like all these people, even Diana Pasulka, every time that Joe Rogan. Because Rogan loves to praise Lazar, and he loves to talk about, nobody knew about element 115 until Lazar came in. It's like, no, that's not true.
Yeah,
scientists knew that they predicted an island of stability in the periodic table, years, decades before the actual official discovery of Moscovian element 115. But Joe doesn't care because he's easily duped by these claims, and he loves to praise Lazar And every time he questions people about Lazar, all these guys are very careful to say, well, Lazar, well, who knows?
Yeah.
I mean, I think with Lazar, it comes down to one of two things. Was he intentionally lying, or was he part of or was he being duped, or maybe a little of both?
Yeah, I think a little of column A and a little of column B. I think that Lazar was someone that people screened him and checked his background and knew that.
There's straight up an article all about him faking his badge being fake.
No, not only that. I mean, Lazar has skeletons in his closet, and I mean literal skeletons. Douglas Dean Johnson, who is someone who has been investigating, especially when it comes to the current legislation that pertains to UAP in American laws. He's also written extensively about Bob Lazar, and he uncovered how Lazar's first wife was involved in a murder back when she was, for some reason, she was involved with the Hells Angels, because I guess she had a really bad upbringing. She was hanging with the wrong crowd when she was a kid, and then because of that, she ended up being in some kind of like drug-related murder, and that's the kind of stuff that probably someone uncovered with Lazar and said, this is someone we can use.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah, my take on that is that we were in a paranormal arms race with the Russians back then. And you remember there was this really convincing Russian footage of a recovered UFO.
Yes.
You remember that? The UFO on edge crashed up against some trees.
Yeah, I remember that footage.
It looked like there's some serious money put into that. The uniforms looked authentic. Vehicles looked authentic. Yeah. And my whole take on that is, the whole Roswell thing was huge back then. Lazar. So, we're saying we have alien tech. Look out. And the Russians are saying, oh, yeah, well, we've got it, too. Look out. And then, well, if you get Lazar, that's going to up the ante. Well, we're reverse engineering them, and let's convince this guy to come out with this story, so that's one speculation on Lazar.
That is one speculation, yeah.
That is very valid. The other thing I wonder is if people were starting to figure out Area 51 is where the stuff was being tested and they were moving it. So they're like, okay, now let's get more eyes on Area 51 because that's not really where we're testing the really new stuff.
Yeah, and let's try to find ways to, sniff out Russian spies.
Yeah, that too.
Using UFOs or bait, all these people going with ufologists. Oh, I want to talk about, all these UFO stories in Area 51, and who are these people talking to? And it's basically kind of like what happened to Paul Bennewitz.
Well, you remember what happened to George Knapp when he went over to Russia? He had this brief period of time with Glasnost, and all these guys came out of the woodwork telling him that they had, secret documents on UFOs, and he actually testified about this in Congress. He gave a statement, a written statement in Congress, talking about his time in Russia, and then the Russians are saying, he was taken to the, these guys were just looking for money and handouts.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Jack Brewer, I think, Jack Brewer wrote a lot about NICAP and the CIA connection. Mm-hmm. And he also wrote a book called The Graves Have Been Framed.
Yeah.
He talks a lot about, intelligence agencies using the UFO thing to sniff out Russian spies. And also that being a big reason that intelligence agencies are actually interested in UFO groups. And it's also a good way to send something out into the pipeline and see where it ends up. So if you tell a trusted, tell an associate, hey, I got a secret UFO thing, you can't tell anybody else. And if it shows up, you can't trust that guy.
And we gotta take a quick break. We'll be right back. Quick mid-show break here. Some contact info and a recommendation. Contact info, everything can be found at wheredidtheroadgo.com. All our social media links, emails, everything. If you have a story you want to share, stories at wheredidtheroadgo.com is the place to send them. General email, contact at wheredidtheroadgo.com. There is a Facebook group, a Facebook page, a Twitter or X account. There's a Reddit. There's a Discord. There's a YouTube. And, of course, we are found on all major podcatchers. So, there's also a Patreon, and if you want to sign up for the Patreon, it's only $3 a month. You get extra content every week, shows at least a week early, sometimes more. I think I'm 2 shows behind at the moment, so Patreons have had 2 shows the last few weeks before they've gone public. And extra benefits here and there. You can also buy Patreon segments. If you just want one segment, you can just go buy that segment. You don't have to sign up if you don't want to, but you get a lot more bang for the buck if you sign up. I want to thank everyone I met at Albatwitch back on October 5th. That was a blast, and that was definitely the best Albatwitch so far. There were just a ton of people there, and I met so many awesome people. So thank you all for coming up and talking to me. I hope everyone enjoys the DVDs. And if you really want a copy of the DVD along with the forthcoming book artwork, drop me a line, and, I'll get you one. Just let me know, and we'll work it out. All right. There is a upcoming show that I recorded throughout the day at Albatwitch Day, and afterwards, that will be up probably next week. I got to do some editing on that. I wanted to get it up this week, but it just wasn't going to happen. And I'm a couple shows ahead, which takes a little bit of pressure off of me. So I'm going to try and do that for next week's show, but we will see. Hopefully it's interesting. Okay, as for a recommendation, I'm going to go with a podcast called Ley Lines. It's fairly new. It's LEYLINES, one word. And it's about ley lines, but mixed with technology. So it's kind of I don't know, it almost gives you a feel of like an Indiana Jones type of thing. It's fun. It's not something that's going to make you think deeply about this stuff, but it's entertaining and fun to listen to. And I don't know how many episodes they have. 7. The 7th one just dropped on October 8th. So I don't know how many episodes they're doing for the first season, but it's been it's been a good listen. So I recommend it. So that's my podcast recommendation for this week. And now back to the show.
Want to continue spooky season after the 31st? Would you like to dive deeper into the world of the paranormal, the occult, cryptozoology, and other unexplainable topics? Then the Strange Realities Conference is the right one for you. Live and online in Nashville, Tennessee, November 1st and 2nd at SIR Nashville, and November 3rd online only. Strange Realities Conference 2024 will feature presentations by Tim Banal, Nathan Isaac, Kendall Lackey, Brent Rains, Micah Hanks, Ren Collier, Joshua Cutchin, Recluse, Nevaeh Terry, and Steve Berg as your Master of Ceremonies. Online with presentations by Seriah Azkath, Timothy Renner, Katie Andrews, Robert Guffey, Greg Bishop, and Becky Ann Galantine. Tickets are $70 in person the whole weekend or $30 online and are available at strangerealitiesconference.com. Don't miss this amazing opportunity to learn from some of the best spooktacular minds in the field of the paranormal.
This is Where Did the Road Go? I'm here with the Red Pill Junkie and Charles Lear, and continue where we left off.
Well, I mean, one thing that I wanted to be clear about, people listening to this roundtable, is they probably think that what we're proposing is that intelligence operatives are faking UFO stories in order to manipulate public perception. And my opinion is that the UFO phenomenon can be both real and at the same time can be used by certain agencies and operatives as a tool, regardless of the true authenticity of the UFO phenomenon. Right?
Yeah,
it can be. That it's just I'd like to see more documentation of it actually being used as a tool. There is that one story where I think it was some South American country the CIA wanted to overthrow, and it was coming out that this was happening. And there was actually a CIA document saying, well, let's spread a UFO story to get the attention off of this whole thing that's coming out. So that's true documentation of them using the UFO story. I think there's another one where it's Spitsbergen. That was another, there's a CIA document saying this was BS and that it was used as an intelligence thing. So those are two that I know of, but I'd like to see a lot more, to say that they definitely are using this. That's not to say they're not. And I see your point. It definitely is a viable tool.
Well, the problem is that I would also like to see more documents about what the CIA was doing during the MK Ultra years. But the problem is that all those documents were destroyed.
Yeah.
Yes.
We got some of them, but I'm sure they just destroyed the most heinous ones first,
So the lack of a paper trail, it's a problem. And that doesn't mean that there is
that they're not. Yeah, I agree.
That there are not a true interest or a true manipulation, and also then you have Diana Pasulka in her book Encounters, saying how the people inside the true UFO gateway program, I guess the legacy keepers or whatever, they have what she called a pencils down policy. Like every time they are going to do stuff related to the UFO topic, they never leave a paper trail. Not only to cover their tracks, but also because, according to her, because they operate like some kind of a secret society in which knowledge has to be imparted from master to apprentice, directly.
There is something I just read that was talking about one of the things that some of the politicians do is you're supposed to record all your official conversations and all that, keep records of everything. So they would have official conversations at lunches and stuff, or sort of meetups where they could get away without recording stuff. So it never quite happened. Mm-hmm. Which is not in any way surprising, but that's kind of the same thing, Yeah.
So to put all this in perspective, the whole, Elizondo in the book and the Congress talking about UFOs, I tried to tell the story of what happened with Martin and James Likowski and Elizondo at work to people who have a mild interest in UFOs and always come up to me with, hey, did you see this, Charles? Did you see this? They don't know who James Likowski is. They don't know who Lou Elizondo is.
I don't know who James Likowski is, by the way.
Story. Okay, I couldn't tell the story.
I was going to ask that earlier, and I didn't want to interrupt.
You guys are the only people I could talk to.
I know these names, but it's even difficult for me
understand
James Likowski's role in the OSAP story.
He was the head of OSAP. He was the guy that.
That's why I don't know him.
He was in charge of the program that was funded.
Okay.
Gotcha. So the official program that was funded was OSAP, and AATIP, he says in his book, was the nickname they used. So nobody really figured out that they were investigating Skinwalker Ranch. Mm-hmm. Likowski was in charge of the $22 million official operation.
So Jay Stratton?
Jay Stratton was the UAP task force. I think he was the first guy before it became Arrow. And he was also running around with Elizondo in what Elizondo calls AATIP. So him and his buddies continuing to investigate UFOs while trying to rustle up funding.
Okay, so Stratton was the guy who was left behind running the office after Elizondo quit in October of 2017.
No, he left. Oh. He talks about another guy. I think his name is Neil. And he's actually got documentation of him handing it over. and it's at the end of the book. But yeah, I forget the guy's name right now. I don't want to take the time to look it up.
Another question I have about the book is, does Elizondo ever mention who was the person who handed Chris Mellon the 3 videos that started this whole, mess?
Yeah, he talks about that. And I don't think he mentions the person.
Because I suspect it was David Grush. I mean, that's my suspicion. I cannot confirm it. That's just, me talking out of my ass. But because Elizondo never claimed to have released them or given those videos to Mellon, although I think that Elizondo was the one who applied to the Pentagon for the release of those videos, although it was under very, I don't want to say false pretenses, but I mean, the way I remember is that the government accepted to release these videos, but never for public consumption. It was just for use for analyses for people who were maybe have not necessarily the necessary security clearances to see them. And then Elizondo ran with that and gave them to TSA. And for a while, the TSA almost like showed them with their watermark and say, well, yeah, we own these videos. And then after a while, the Pentagon kind of like admitted that the videos were real and say, well, yeah, these videos are, public domain. And then that's when everybody stopped using the To the Stars watermark, like saying, this video is public knowledge.
And a lot of those videos, at least in part, had been released years prior. I mean, they weren't really giving us anything new.
Yeah, exactly. The FLIR one video, the Tic Tac that had been in some kind of like the bulletin board since 2004, I think.
So he does address the videos in the book, of course, but he says that he received an officially stamped Form 1910 with the following words: unlimited distribution.
That's not true, but okay.
Yeah, he said it. It was an email from the Department. The Department of Defense Office of Pre-Publication and Security Review.
I've seen the stamp from that contained the envelope where the cities were given. I mean, it's amazing that the government still uses CD technology to handle videos, and basically the legalese said, not for public consumption.
Yeah. You think they still have overhead projectors?
I'm sure there are still at least 1 or 2 faxes operating inside the Pentagon.
So the thing about Elizondo as well is that his story just keeps changing.
Exactly.
And it's funny because Matt Festa had just sent me some videos a little while ago that I finally got around to watching, about Hulk Hogan lying, because Hulk Hogan lies like an unreal amount in ways that are just mind-boggling. And like when you look at Luis Elizondo, it's kind of the same thing. It may not, Lou is definitely smarter, but it's still the same type of thing where you start off saying one thing and then you slowly adapt it to something else, and then your importance in it changes. It's the same type of sort of like twisting something that might have had some piece of truth in it into something completely different.
Isn't that kind of a constant in ufology?
It depends on the people, though. Some people have been pretty solid with their stories.
No, I concur, but
in popular ufology, and the people who are stars, definitely.
Yeah. I'd like to see. What's killing me is that they're only focusing, and the focus is on military records. When you guys know about the National UFO Research Center?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, David Marler's thing. He's got a building. Rio Rancho school system set him up with it, and he's got an agreement with them. And he's got the big 3. He's got QFOS, APRO. He finally got APRO. And NICAP, along with the files of a lot of other researchers. And what an unbelievable resource of data that is. I've looked at those files. They're amazing. And I would really like to see somebody from the government, go take a look at those files, because I think that they need a lot
Who
of
makes you think they haven't done so? I mean, I remember reading in, what's the name of the author of The Close Encounters, man? The biography of J. Allen Hynek.
I don't know.
Mark something. Forgive me for not remembering the name.
So but I can look it up real quick.
One of the things.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. It's Mark O'Connell.
Mark O'Connell. Okay, so Mark O'Connell wrote. I remember reading in that book that after the death of J. Allen Hynek, I think it was in 1986, that the people who were still running the CUFOS office, they saw there were people who were snooping into their files, and they found that there were files missing from their cabinets. So I think what you're saying, Charles, and I agree, is that it's very probable that private civilian ufologists have better data and better files about UFOs.
That's what I'm saying.
Than the actual government.
Because they were focused and passionate about it and encouraged people to report. And the big thing that came out during the first hearings was that we are going to start to encouraging our military personnel to report. So if they weren't encouraging, if they were discouraged to report their UFO files, what data could they have been collecting, like consistently and organized fashion since the close of Blue Book in '69? And if you look at Blue Book, their collection is totally inconsistent. The only times it had any kind of real value was with Ruppelt and Robert Friend. So the government's collection of this data has been totally inconsistent and totally not focused. Meanwhile, the private investigators have been focused and passionate, and there's a wealth of information just sitting there in Rio Rancho. So I really hope that somebody is looking at that, because, it's just purely for educational purposes.
My question is, why do we trust anything the government says?
Because they stamp a seal of, officialdom into the things they do, and that's something that ufologists are always craving for.
Yeah.
Our Constitution
is always craving for this legitimacy.
Our Constitution says they are us and we are them.
But then
are we lying to ourselves?
I remember the
first. You guys are
first.
making my unicorn cry here, man.
I remember the first of the congressional hearing about UFOs. Well, I'm talking about the first modern one, and the people that were there on behalf of the UAP task force, trying to answer the questions from the Congress members, and they didn't know a thing about Project Blue Book. They didn't know a thing about the Robertson panel. They didn't know a thing about all these cases of UFOs allegedly tampering with Malmstrom with nuclear missiles, and they will say, well, we don't know about that. And that's the problem, that every time the ufologists, the UFO people are crying for the government to pay attention to UFOs, the government say, fine, we'll appoint someone, and the guy is like the guy who gets the short straw, as in, I need to do this, like this guy, Sean Kirkpatrick. He has probably a skeleton crew and very limited time and resources to do it.
That was like Project Blue Book, for instance.
And he doesn't know. Exactly. He doesn't have the time or the inclination to go and read the literature and get immersed into all this stuff. And then he says, well, I didn't find anything, so all these stories are BS. And then the UFO people say, oh, this is a cover-up, he's lying. And then their cycle gets repeated ad nauseum.
Well, yeah, that's why, why I'm saying, history is super important, because you keep seeing these cycles repeating. And if you don't know your history, you don't recognize it, and it's all new again.
Yeah.
So, but I think The interesting thing also is with Elizondo's book, when he gets into Likowski and talking about the angels and demons, and he actually mentions the Collins Elite as well. But
so interesting.
But if you're getting into that, because I personally am open to the idea that part of what we're dealing with the paranormal in general is what we used to call the gods and goddesses. I'm saying, that's one speculation I'm open to. But if you get, if that is what it really is, then you get into the question of, well, the separation of church and state. And so, should you guys be, trying to prove that God exists? That's not your business. Take care of my roads, damn it.
Right. Yeah, they can't do that.
Yeah,
can't take care of the people or the infrastructure, but we can spend billions on UFO research that brings us nothing to the table.
Yeah, so.
But then what you're saying is that imagine if the United States had somehow developed some kind of like secret technology that somehow had proven the existence of the soul. Something like that. But since, like you're saying, that is not their provenance, that is not their business, that knowledge is hidden forever.
Yeah, but interestingly, Elizondo said in his interview with Martin again, that he said, I think he said, I don't want somebody from the government telling me what UFOs are. He said, you probably get a better answer from your priest or spiritual advisor or your grandmother, something like to that effect. So I found that really intriguing that he said that.
I also found interesting in the Daily Show conversation that the host there is just like, so you're telling me aliens are here, and they might be dangerous, and you're worried about the bureaucratic paperwork?
Exactly.
Yeah, that was awesome.
That was brilliant. Yeah.
And a very valid, simple point.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly.
How dangerous can they be if you're worried about the paperwork?
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. You're telling people, oh, this is a threat and it's coming. It's imminent. That's literally the title you put in the book. But then, okay, so when are we going to do something about it? Well, we first need to pass this law and in order to get the funds for this new consulting operation, and it might take 20 years more.
Right.
Okay, so it's not so much of a threat, right? I mean, it's not like the aliens are going to eat our brains anytime soon.
Yeah, so that's good. Well, I don't know, not according to an article in the Mirror. I think a guy named Dave McLean, maybe?
Oh, yeah, I saw.
Did you see that?
Yeah.
He said something to the effect that, he had everything in there, like the whole we're being distracted for a new world order and the alien treaty. I should look this up.
Yeah, like the truce was coming to a halt between the aliens and the government, and I found it so hilarious, like trying to envision some kind of like a treaty between an intergalactic race, if you're going to that angle of the UFO idea, the intergalactic visitors and the people of Earth, is as ludicrous as me trying to get into diplomatic relationships with the ants that are in my backyard, and they are making a mess.
Right.
Okay, I'm going to get the DDT, but first maybe we can sign a peace agreement so we don't have to go with the weapons of ant destruction here.
Yeah. So this is in the Mirror. USA whistleblower, quote, claims huge UFO announcement will happen within days. So it makes a point that his credentials can't be verified. But his name is McNeal, Charles McNeal. I mean, it's going into this whole.
All these people, I mean, and all their claims, and and all they have in their favor are their credentials. I mean, even this woman, Anjali, remember her, 2 years ago?
Yeah.
When she was talking about this alien cave where she was going to take people in.
Oh, yeah.
And obviously the story was like many stories we've heard thousands and thousands of times, totally unprovable, totally unlikely, but she had some type of government connection, so that's why some people kind of like gave her the benefit of the doubt.
Well, good old Robert O'Dean. That was his whole shtick, his... he was a big colonel or something like that.
Yeah, Philip Corso, it's...
Yeah, that's a really weird one, because he had such a credential. He had pristine credentials. I mean, he was top notch up there.
But having credentials doesn't mean you actually know anything about this stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it also gives you, believe what I say, regardless of the fact that I'm not going to give you any sources or references.
Yeah.
Jimmy Carter is going to turn 100 next week.
Oh my God.
What happens if in his deathbed, President Carter, before he dies, says, oh, by the way, aliens are real, and they told me about it when I was in the White House.
Oh, that's a good one. And it'll probably just go up. People who believe it will believe it, and people who don't won't. It's not going to change a thing.
It's not going to change a thing.
You go back to Tim Benoit, show me the effing aliens.
I love that. Yes, exactly. I need to do a drawing of Tim saying that.
Absolutely.
So we are out of time, but if you guys are down, we can continue this conversation in the Patreon.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm right. I'm there.
All right. Tell people where they can find you, Charles.
I write a daily blog for Martin Willis at podcastufo.com.
Okay.
And also you publish
weekly blog. Oh, yeah. Some guy did this really awesome cover for it, too. Crashed Saucers and Malevolent Aliens, lavishly, the cover, beautiful cover by Red Pill Junkie, and it's available at Amazon.com.
And Red Pill, if people want you to design their next cover.
They should find me at absurdbydesign.com. And if they want to read me, article like the one we discussed at the beginning of this show, they can head out to the Daily Grail, dailygrail.com, where they will find a treasure trove of information that is, I want to say it is well balanced, because it's neither highly skeptical, not we go into the true believer camp. We try to take things like the UFO phenomenon in a rational but open-minded way.
Yeah, I agree. Very good website. Even before I knew you, I liked the Grail. All right, thank you both.
Cheers. It's really a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, very fun.
All right, I'd like to take a moment here to thank all of my Patreons for their support. Without you, this show would not be possible. And I want to give a shout out to those of you pledging $10 or more. Greg Ross, John Blackburn, Madeline J., Matt in Delaware, Allison Cook, Super Inframan, 36 Dingo, Tim, Andrew Nichols, Matthew Sproul, Martha, Midnight Review Presents, Christine, a blue second-gen MR2 drifting around a Japanese mountain, Patricia Giaquinta, American Rambler, Andrew Maines, Ann Witowski, Barbara Fisher, Beverly Williamson, Illuminati, Bright Rectangle, Charles Davis, Charles in Florida, Land of the Crazy and Communicable, Corey Nelson, Craig Parmenter, Diane B., MTK, Eric Citron, Eric Todd, History and Coffee, J. Otto Bullitt, Jack Huntington, James Lindsay, Jamin Sophie, John Mattingly, John Bracken, Carla Mahoney, Kevin Schreck, Cool Kitty, Kristen L., Laser Printer Jam, Lauren McLean, Linda, Linz Jackson K., MJ Armstrong, Mark Brady, Sasha McHale, Schmooples, Devourer of Mortal Souls, Marty Garza, Mark Shoemaker, Jonathan Frost, Ole Andre Olar, Paul Jeffries, Perry Peters, Philosopher of Mirrors, Riker and Stark, Ron Dupre, Sam Sharon, Sarah Horgan, Stacy Sherwood, Stevie Norman, Strange Stories with the Seeker and Skeptic podcast, Tactical Therapist, Taylor Bell, Thunderboy, Tyler Glimstead, Varosh K, Victoria, Vincent Trewell, Will Gebhard, Will Powell, Ren Collier, Annabelle Smith, Caroline Walker, TDT Skunkworks, Matthew Brown, Colin Karras, and Craig Sagastumi. Thank you all so very much for the support. I hope you enjoyed that conversation. There is a lengthy Patreon segment to follow if you are a Patreon. And you can become a Patreon by just going to wheredidtheroadgo.com and click on the big Patreon link. And if you just want a segment and you don't want to subscribe, you can buy those separately as well. And you get the shows a week or two early. At this point, it's 2 weeks early. I'm trying to catch up. And you get extra content with almost every show, plus extra stuff throughout the month. Regardless, www.wheredidtheroadgo.com for all your Where Did the Road Go needs. And you can buy merchandise. You can listen to any show all the way back to the very first one. And a brand new site put together by Mr. John Tudor. I'll see you next time. You have been listening to Where Did the Road Go? This show is made possible in part from our Patreons, and we thank you and everyone listening for helping us continue this exploration of the strange. You can always find everything Where Did the Road Go related at www.wheredidtheroadgo.com. And thank you so much for your support.